Hello, I'm Stephen Priestley. I'm standing for UKIP for Brent Central Constituency.
We're going to talk about UKIP and your decision to stand for UKIP.
Well, I'd like to preempt the answer, which I will definitely come to, by saying how I first come into politics. I've worked in the NHS for 20 years, working with some of the most vulnerable people in the community, in the community mental health team, in various parts of London. And in that time period, I've seen so many changes to social care provision and also within the NHS. So I've come into this political route in a very unorthodox way. I'm not a kind of your orthodox career politician. I'm not in any way motivated by self-interest. I've come into politics with a real, sincere desire to make a massive difference to the lives of the people in Brent Central. And my working life has led to my passionate commitment to enter politics for those reasons. UKIP in particular, the main message and the main reason I chose UKIP is that I do feel that Britain has moved away from a position of being able to govern itself. The EU, although it brings many benefits to this country, initially when we joined in 1972, it was for the purposes of, and it was branded as, the common market. Now, I believe the electorate in that period were given a kind of potted reason for subscribing to the EU, and they failed to point out back in those days that they were subscribing also to a political vision of a European Parliament which had greater control of our own laws, our own business practices, and in short, our sovereignty. So my feeling is that the UK, we have our own parliament, we have our own judicial system, and it's very important that the UK is able to govern itself again and is released from the stranglehold of European regulation. The European courts, which frequently out-trump our own courts, which I feel is completely wrong. And I think that there are lots of people in this country that feel very passionately about the EU stifling our own life here in some way. I think it's also a real myth that the EU, if we come out of the EU, there's a lot of scaremongering going on saying that Britain might lose millions and millions of pounds financially for joining UKIP was about its stance with the European Union. Now, in terms of again, my route into politics, I was born in Hong Kong. I lived there for 18 years. I have a German mother. I have many friends from all over the world. I've worked in different countries. And also the UK has a long, long history of accepting people from the Commonwealth and the immigrants in the UK for decades. My belief is that the immigrants and immigration, of course, is a very, very sensitive subject. However, in my view, we need to see it in a different way. Immigrants have a very, very important part to play in our economy, also in Brent Central. And for example, if we were to withdraw all the doctors and nurses and ancillary kind of professionals from the NHS and other institutions, our country would probably collapse anyway. We are really dependent upon people from the Commonwealth. I feel, as regards immigration, coming back to the EU issue again, this is where I think a lot of people feel we need to have some control, and every country needs to have some control over its borders. Now, if we remain members of the EU, the freedom of movement is an enshrined principle for all EU member states. Now, I do not want to come across as some kind of saber-rattling person who's going to tarnish everybody with the same brush. That's completely wrong, and that's not the kind of person I am. There are, however, in some cases, in the media, they've reported them, there are some cases where, for example, people from EU member states who joined recently have come to this country with the aim of making a better life. And of course everybody has the aspiration to improve their lives, so I'm not opposed to that.
But are they taking jobs from British people?
No, I didn't want to refer to the job issue. I mean, there's some people, for example, who would come to the UK and from day one they want to claim benefits. Now, for me, I think it's about a sense of fairness. If you come to the country and from day one want to claim social security benefits without having ever paid anything in to the national insurance system, to me, that I think, and I'm sure I'm not the only person that thinks that that needs to be looked at. It's all about fairness. And also, I think UKIP as a party is probably the only party that has really forced this into the public realm. The whole issue of immigration and borders, migration also, I can talk about migration in a minute, but the UKIP has actually had the honesty to raise this as an issue that needs to be talked about, because also there are practical reasons for this. In a kind of environment of diminishing resources, housing, NHS, cutbacks, austerity, which have happened since 2010, it's also a question of what the infrastructure of our country can actually sustain. And so it's really, UKIP is wanting to have an honest, open debate about what, the numbers have increased dramatically. The Conservative predictions about, David Cameron making pledges about, bringing migration to certain figures, which clearly were unrealistic, and he wasn't able to keep to his pledge. And we need to have a debate about it, because it's about infrastructure, it's about services, and if there isn't enough money to finance hospitals, schools, housing, then the system will collapse anyway. So we need to have an honest debate about it. It isn't about racism. UKIP is frequently brandished as, it's about stigmatizing people, it's kind of hysterically whipping up fears. I would challenge that. I would say it isn't about that. It's about actually coming up with a fair, accountable, transparent management of our infrastructure in this country.
Let's get back to Brent Central, some other key issues for you. Let's just run through these briefly. So perhaps from you, Stephen, 3 other key issues that are particularly important to Brent Central, and where UKIP stands on them. We can get quite punchy answers on these as a clear manifesto from you.
Sure. Number 1, for me, top of the agenda, the NHS. UKIP is committed to keeping the NHS free at the point of delivery, and it must be based on clinical need, and that's something I will be fighting fiercely to protect if elected as your MP. So the other is housing as well. I think that house prices and housing provision is a critical problem in Brent Central. More needs to be done to provide different housing options for people, so there needs to be greater investment to build more houses, make it more affordable for people, as the average price in Brent for a house is beyond what most people can afford. Landlords need to be tackled as well. Tenancies need to be lengthened to between 2 to 3 years, and I do agree, and UKIP is also for putting a cap on the rent charges that landlords can rack up. I think it's about rebalancing and making things fairer for ordinary people. The other priority is crime, and UKIP as well is committed to funding the police and making sure that there are more officers on the street, and I think the general public want to see more officers and a much more visible presence on the streets of Brent, and that's what I would also be campaigning to deliver.
Let's have a think from your perspective about voters who might be voting for you. Which voters are you targeting? It's a marginal constituency. Sarah Tether standing down for the Dems, Labour are coming in strongly, the Conservatives coming in very strongly as well. Where are your votes going to come from, and who or how do you hope to upset the apple cart?
Well, I have no illusion that I've probably chosen one of the most difficult constituencies in the entire country to stand as a UKIP candidate. But and also it's very difficult to give a categorical answer about where my votes are going to come from. But I hope that the electorate will give real thought to some of the front runners in the race. For example, the Labour, who are hoping to win in Brent Central. Now, to my mind, I hope that the voters have longer memories and that they think about the financial position that the country came into under the previous Labour administrations. And my point would be, even though the coalition has not been perfect, this fiscal responsibility that we've had since 2010 is an important consideration. I think also, to be fair, UKIP isn't in the position of kind of forming a government. UKIP is hopefully going to get some seats. And again, the numbers are very difficult to predict as well, but we're hoping, UKIP is hoping it might be 10 to 15 seats up and down the country. My main hope is that, I do as well as possible. It's very hard to predict the numbers, but also a lot of people within UKIP are looking beyond 2015. They want to have a much better platform for 2020, so it's a longer term vision for the future.
Let's talk about UKIP and Nigel Farage, great poster boy for UKIP, very much a very enigmatic leader. Tell us what he's done for the party. Have you noticed a lot more engagement from voters because you've got a well-known figure at the head of the party?
Yes, there's no way of understating his power. In Thanet Sounds, where he's standing, he's fighting a very, very strong campaign, and there's been huge support for him. I've met him several times, and I have to say he's highly personable, a very kind of humble person who I think the electorate can relate to, and also he's seen in pubs frequently, holding a pint and standing outside pubs having a cigarette. I think his likability factor is really there, and the way he deals with things directly. He's not the kind of soundbite politician that wants to wrap everything up in beautiful electoral ideas where you wonder what on earth has actually been said afterwards. He tackles an issue directly. He's not afraid of being actually controversial, as has been seen in the TV debates. Sometimes I think the examples he chooses might be too controversial and get him into hot water on occasion, but generally he raises some difficult issues and challenges the mainstream and opens up a debate, and I think that's always a good thing.
Let's wrap up with, in a nutshell, what is going to make voters in Brent Central vote for you?
Well, in a nutshell, what I hope they can see is the passion. That's why I've come into this. It would have been far easier for me just to stay in my professional comfort zone and carry on in the mental health field. But I've come out of that to make a stand, to try and make life better, and really be one of those politicians that wants to be accountable to the electorate. I also believe, as UKIP do, that there should be a recall of MPs that actually are not delivering on their pledge to the electorate. I think MPs must be accountable. Like all other professions, they have a code of ethics, they have licenses. If the MP doesn't deliver for their constituents should have the right to recall them. And so I would be serving and fighting fiercely for the people of Brent all year round. That would be my commitment to you.
Excellent, thank you very much. Anything